What's up? My name is Eric Butler. This channel is called Report and Opine. I am back, and this is a video from a man named Jacob Ward, I believe. I found it completely randomly on Instagram because he says that somebody broke into his car in Oakland, California while his 9-year-old daughter was inside. And while this man is very level-headed, he makes some good points, and I'm sure he does mean well, he stops short of actually saying anything that would work towards fixing this problem. So at the end of it, he basically says, oh, well, we need some more government handouts and inequality and affordable housing and all this nonsense, because they're all trained and brainwashed to do that, and they don't ever want to actually fix the problem because they can't say what the problem is. Mayor London Breed in San Francisco, right across the bridge, said that, well, I think the dope problem, it's flooding our streets, it might be caused largely by a population of Honduran immigrants. And rather than say, okay, well, let's try to get to the bottom of that, they say, you're a racist. And it's because they don't want to ever fix the problem. They want to point the finger at somebody else and tell you that they did it. Meanwhile, there's been this weirdo Democratic supermajority in the state of California for a very long time, but that's a different story, and I digress. So let's hear, the story of how this man's car was broken into in broad daylight in Oakland, California, with his daughter inside. And I also have a couple other articles that we can sort of compare and contrast this with after, keeping in mind the story of how Dave Chappelle called out San Francisco and the San Francisco media says, well, you're a transformer-phobic bigot, which has nothing to do with the problems going on in your city that Dave Chappelle called out. But again, that's a different story, but we want to keep it in mind when we listen to this story and look at some of the other articles concerning the Bay Area.
Somebody broke into my car last week with my 9-year-old inside. And so immediately, of course, I think about blame. And I blame myself first, right? Because
that's fair. That makes sense. Take accountability. I think there's a lot of people in the Bay Area that wouldn't even get that far.
I left her in the car while I ran in to buy something. I was buying my wife a gift certificate for Mother's Day.
And okay, so he kind of pulls back. Well, I was being nice. I was buying my wife something for Mother's Day, which is totally fair and understandable. But you also have to understand that there is a group, a sect of people in this area that don't even want you to say that. And I know it sounds extreme, but there are people there that are talking about birthing person and chest feeders and all this stuff. They want to completely eliminate reality, and that's a totally separate problem than the criminal element that the same region is dealing with.
In broad daylight on a busy shopping street, we're surrounded by people. I hear a scream, door opens, I can see the door opening. I begin running, I hear my daughter screaming. Guy reaches in, he grabs my laptop, he grabs her Pinkie Pie backpack, which means he reaches for her, which scares the bejesus out of her, of course, traumatizes her, and jumps in a car, speeds off. There's no way to, we caught the license plate, we have everything, but Oakland PD, you write into a website to report it, but nothing happens.
Of course nothing's going to happen. And we all know nothing's going to happen. That's not new, right? There's a Seinfeld episode about Jerry's apartment getting broken into, or his car being stolen. I can't remember which one, where he's talking to the cops like, oh, you think you're going to get it? And they're like, no, of course not. The Oakland Police Department, they keep running these ads on Instagram about their hiring. They can't stop a group of thugs from taking over a major intersection in the city, or the Bay Bridge for that matter. So there's no way there's no way this guy's laptop is going to move the needle. His whole life might have been on that. He might have been working on that. He might have, who knows? I don't know what he does for a living. We can maybe look into that at a later date. But there's no way that the Oakland Police Department is going to have time, and even if they did, they probably wouldn't help this guy, right? Because we're also told that white people are the problem. So now you're the victim, buddy, but there are a bunch of people there that could care less because you're white. And it's the same thing, like you're talking about your wife and your daughter, and they don't want to hear you talk about that either. But you're still walking on eggshells to appease them, even though I would venture to say there's a good amount of people that could not care any less, and that's why you continue to lose.
Of course. So then you want to blame that, right? You want to blame the guy. You want to blame yourself. People in the rest of the country want to blame our laws, and they, talk about the threshold past which something is considered a misdemeanor versus a felony, and somehow that is making the difference here. Well, here's the difference.
Well, let's not pretend that doesn't make a difference at all, because it does. But this is where he's going to kind of begin to go off the rails a little bit and say, well, it doesn't matter what the threshold is for theft. But we can see it. We can watch 17 Walgreens leave the city, Nordstrom, Whole Foods, all because of theft and safety for the employees. And we're going to pretend that that $950 threshold means absolutely nothing, right? I mean, as far as I'm concerned, you could put it down to $5, but they've shown already they have control. The criminal element has control, and they're not going to relinquish it now because they have the backing of the criminal political establishment, right? They're in cahoots. It's the same thing. It's like the rich politicians and the rich media elites are basically funding the dope habits of the people self-vaccinating under the bridge because they're not going to ask questions. And anybody in between that is going to be a problem. And unfortunately, it looks like you are a problem and nobody's going to help you, bro. So you should probably leave or stay. I don't care.
Difference. Here in California, $950 is the threshold past which a theft becomes a felony, and people think that's lenient. In more than,
even though I would assume, I don't know, this guy probably has a fancy MacBook Pro, so it should be more than $950, but apparently not. I don't know. That's just my assumption.
30 other states, it is higher than that. And in Texas, it's $2,500, way higher. So it's not that.
So I would have to fact check that. And I'm not saying he's lying here, but so you're telling me that in the entire state of Texas, it's not a felony theft until $2,500? I don't know. Fact check me. Look it up. Leave a comment. Subscribe to the channel so I can get monetized and stop watching YouTube ads. Different story. I digress. Moving on.
Obviously, when I talked to the district attorney for San Francisco, here in San Francisco,
So he had no problem getting in touch with a district attorney. I don't think that's typically very easy, but I don't know. I've never tried to do it.
Is talking about how this perception versus reality thing, when it comes to violent crime, which is very low in San Francisco compared to other cities, versus property crime, where the crime rate's very high. Here's how she described how perception and reality shapes her priorities.
Our metric is what the people of San Francisco feel.
Wait. So he said he talked to her, but then he clips in an interview of her. So this is clearly not the conversation that he had with her. This is a news clip.
The people who come into San Francisco to work and to visit feel. And irrespective of what the data shows.
And we know, just like London Breed, this is a woman of color. So she should be able to do no wrong by their rules.
We have a job to do to make sure that we address that feeling.
So what's weird about that, right, is that she's acting as if the acting on those feelings is going to make a difference. Of course, we know from multiple independent academic analyses that the actions and the policies of DAs don't really make any difference to the underlying.
Okay, so now this should paint a very clear picture of how the race card and the race baiting that is constantly happening doesn't matter. So this guy is the victim, but he's white, so you probably don't care. And he is now criticizing a woman of color in a position of power, so you should hate him even more for that. And she should be able to do no wrong, even though the folks in San Francisco don't like her right now because she is refusing to prosecute a security guard who shot a transformer activist at a Walgreens. That is also a completely different story, and I don't think it's reached its peak yet, so maybe we'll see a video on that later.
Crime rate. So,
but the point is, with all this race baiting, they can't follow anything to its logical conclusion, right? So she should be able to do no wrong. He's going to always be the oppressor in a position of power. Meanwhile, his little daughter has been traumatized by a thug in Oakland. So it's all completely messed up, but they'll look right past it and still go back to the race card somehow, some way.
It leaves me with nobody to blame. Myself, fundamentally. That is who I.
That's right. You are to blame for leaving your daughter in the car, especially in Oakland, California. And you probably should have just left the window down at this point, right? I mean, it's very well known. It's no secret that you can't park your car anywhere in Oakland or San Francisco. That's not new. I don't know if you've been oblivious. You've, been eyeball deep in work and you had no idea. You thought your 9-year-old daughter was going to act as a security mechanism. You're completely wrong.
Blame, but it is really hard to blame.
And this, we're also reminded of a story. Sorry, I don't know who am I apologizing to. We're also reminded of a story in San Francisco, right across the bridge. I don't know, a couple of months ago, when a CNN crew was reporting on crime in the city and had their truck, their van, their production crew while they had security guards outside of it, was broken into. So if you take, we're talking about a matter of seconds that these people will do that. Whether it's a security guard or whether it's a 9-year-old white girl, they do not care. That's how far we've come. And he still doesn't have the balls to say anything that would even move the needle towards changing it. He's just going to say, oh, well, we need more. It's such inequality. We need more housing. Give me a break, bro. Wake up.
I don't know. It's hard to account for it. But here's the thing that I think I'm taking away from it. My daughter is kind of my emotional guru. I go to her for advice on how to feel about all sorts of things.
Yeah, well, there's your problem.
It makes me tear up to sort of describe this, but the first thing she said, through tears, while she's still shaking and traumatized, she says, why are people so desperate they feel they need to steal things?
Because the political regime has made it to where there is no more middle class. There's just a bunch of junkies and thugs shooting each other and shooting up under the Bay Bridge. And types like you, who I would assume are probably pretty well off, doing a good job driving around with your laptop and your daughter in the car trying to buy something for your wife. It doesn't seem to me like he's struggling, to pay the rent out in Oakland, California.
And she spent the rest of the day talking about how we need to make more housing for people and how people need to have more money. She sees the big picture.
So give him your money, right? Your 9-year-old daughter sees the big picture and says that we need more affordable housing, and that's the reason your car got broken into. And she sees the big picture. And this is the reason why nothing gets done, is because you, guys like you, women, men, zim, zers, are taking cues from 9-year-old children and telling them that they are in charge. They know what's best. They can pick their gender. And then you wonder why everything is collapsing.
So much better than I think the rest of us do. May we all be as cool as a 9-year-old crime victim and, I don't know, turn this whole thing around.
Yeah. Okay. So listening to a 9-year-old crime victim is not going to be the way to turn this whole thing around. More affordable housing. He has the hashtag inequality here. That's not how you're going to turn around. Why don't you start with your money, right? What's your job? What do you do? Why don't you start by handing something out? Why don't you give the criminals, I should say, some of your stuff? And here we go. I honestly hadn't even looked at this, but it makes sense now. Jacob Ward, him video creator for NBC News. And it all comes full circle, makes complete sense. And maybe we'll do, and look, I'm not really ragging on, I am kind of ragging on him. I wanted to be better about this, but for him to say that his 9-year-old daughter is, has the best idea, we need more housing and give them more money, it's not going to work, bro. And then to see that he works for NBC News, it all comes full circle. And you, my friend, this guy is probably the epitome of weak men create hard times. And then we have some articles, right? Because they were so mad at Dave Chappelle about, saying that, what the hell happened in San Francisco? So the San Francisco Chronicle publishes, so San Francisco is an unlivable, undesirable hellhole. Try finding an apartment here. As someone who recently moved to a new place in San Francisco, I can assure you finding an apartment is absurdly competitive as ever. You're still missing the point, lady. That is one of the reasons why it's absurdly unlivable or undesirable, whatever it is. That is part of it. And you can't even tell, right? You can't even tell that your ilk, your type of weirdo elitist, well, I just moved here and it's so difficult. Yeah, that's why people don't like it. That's one of the reasons, right? How long before this woman writes another opinion piece about the needles and the human feces that she has to step over when she gets outside of her front door? And then you have one from the LA Times. Sorry, San Francisco is not the crime-ridden hellhole the far right claims it is. Now, is Dave Chappelle far right? When did that happen, right? Dave Chappelle is still saying that he's not rich because he's a black man in America, which is completely off base, but that's a different story. And they want you to believe, they obviously put this picture of drag queens or whatever up here, that, first of all, it's only the far right claiming that it is. Well, how is this possible? Because we have another one here from the New York Post, clear across the country with the exclusive, and everybody, this version of this story is everywhere now. but San Francisco deploys National Guard in fight against drug zombies. But deals are still happening in the street. And you know who deployed that National Guard? Gavin Newsom, the white person that is supposed to be the problem. And Gavin Newsom is a huge problem, but not for the reason that the weirdo, extreme, left-wing, establishment, hack shills say he is, right? Because by their logic, he's a problem simply because he's a white man, but they will never say that. They're saying he's not going far enough left. He didn't sign on for reparations. He's deploying the National Guard, which I'm sure they would basically just, assume like cops. You see the same thing happening in New York. They're protesting the cops because of a private citizen, a former Marine who subdued a guy on a subway, and somehow it turns into the cops. Same thing in San Francisco with this Barco, whatever this person is, their new martyr right now who was eliminated for stealing from a Walgreens or something like that. Don't quote me. Go ahead and fact check. Maybe we'll do a video later. But that person just happened to be a transformer activist, right? Just randomly. And they always throw allegedly shoplifting, right? So, and I'm not sitting here saying that anybody deserves to get a bullet for shoplifting, but there's always an element there. It's never exactly what they sell you. So while the drug zombies are flooding the street and there's a certain population of flooding the streets with dope, the LA Times and the San Francisco Chronicle want you to believe, oh no, everything's fine, it's not that bad. And look, I'm sure the media is known for embellishment, the media is known for lying, but which is it? Is it as bad as the New York Post says it is, or is it as good as the SF Gate says it is? It's all completely disgusting, and that's part of the point, right? Is to drive chaos so nobody knows exactly what's going on, and they can just gain more control. And the last one here, San Francisco city officials encourage residents to expunge old criminal records under new state law. So they have a new state law to where, I guess, and a lot of these could deserve their own video. We shall see. But they want residents to expunge their old criminal records so they made a new law that will allow you to get rid of your criminal past. Meanwhile, they are championing current criminals, just like they do in New York. Meanwhile, people are breaking into cars, thugs, hoodlums are breaking into cars with little people inside them, and they want us to believe that it's really not that bad. It's only the far right that says that, and you should probably expunge your criminal record so nobody knows about it, right? This is how bad it's become. There's another video that I did about the elimination of the middle class that's happening in California, and I always tie it to the elimination of the middle ground of an argument. A little bit apples to oranges. Go ahead and check that one out. Anyhow, thank you for watching. Please like, comment, share, and of course, subscribe.